What would you do if months of
Oh my
sacrifice,
God!
sweat and
What
tears
happened?
were destroyed in minutes by someone you trusted? This is the story of a parent's unwavering love, a dream shattered by carelessness, and a lesson about family boundaries that will make you question everything you thought you knew about forgiveness. Stay until the end and let us know in the comments. Would you have done the same? Sarah Mitchell was 38 years old when she made a decision that would change everything. Living in a modest two-bedroom apartment in southeast Portland, Oregon, she was a single mother doing everything in her power to give her daughter a better life than she had. The apartment was small but clean, with windows that overlooked the busy streets of Division Street, where the sound of traffic became a constant companion to their daily routine. Her daughter, Emily, was 16 and brilliant. Not the kind of brilliant that parents say just because they love their children, but genuinely gifted. Emily had fallen in love with biology when she was 12, spending hours watching documentaries about cellular research and reading scientific journals that most adults would find incomprehensible. Her room was covered with posters of DNA helixes, microscopic images of cells, and quotes from famous scientists like Rosalind Franklin and Jane Goodall. Emily attended Franklin High School, where she had become a standout student in the science department. Her biology teacher, Mr. Chen, had taken notice of her exceptional talent and encouraged her to apply for the National Science Foundation's Young Researchers Program. It was a prestigious competition that offered full university scholarships to winners. But there was a requirement that seemed insurmountable. Students needed to conduct original research using professional-grade equipment. One rainy evening in February, Emily came home from school with tears streaming down her face. Sarah's heart dropped, immediately fearing the worst. But these were not tears of sadness. Emily was holding a printed page with information about a research project she wanted to pursue, studying the effects of environmental pollutants on human cell regeneration. Mr. Chen believed she had a real shot at winning the scholarship. The problem was the equipment. She needed a professional medical microscope, specifically one with high-powered lenses capable of magnifying up to 1,000 times. The cost was $5,200. For most families, this would be a significant expense. For Sarah, working as a production line worker at a manufacturing plant, it was nearly impossible. She made $14 an hour, working 40 hours a week. After rent, utilities, food, and Emily's school expenses, there was barely anything left. She had maybe $60 in savings at any given time. That night, after Emily went to bed, Sarah sat at their small kitchen table with a calculator, a notepad, and a determination that surprised even herself. She did the math over and over. If she could pick up extra shifts at the plant and get a second job on weekends, maybe, just maybe, she could save enough. It would take months. It would mean no new clothes, no eating out, no small luxuries. It would mean sacrifice on a level she had never attempted before. The next morning, Sarah asked her supervisor at the plant if she could work overtime, 14-hour shifts, 6 days a week. Her supervisor, a man named Dale, who had known Sarah for 7 years, looked at her with concern. He knew what those hours would do to a person. The plant was hot, loud, and physically demanding. Workers stood for hours operating machinery that assembled automotive parts. The air was thick with the smell of metal and industrial lubricant, but he also knew Sarah well enough to know that when she made up her mind, there was no talking her out of it. Sarah also found weekend work as a server at a busy diner called Rosie's on Hawthorne Boulevard. The restaurant was always packed with Portland's eclectic mix of artists, students, and families. The shifts were exhausting, dealing with difficult customers, running between tables, and staying on her feet for 8 hours straight. But the tips were decent, and every dollar went into a jar she kept hidden in her closet, marked with a small piece of tape that read, "Emily's Future." The routine became brutal almost immediately. Sarah would wake up at 4 in the morning, brew a strong pot of coffee, and drive through the dark Portland streets to the manufacturing plant. The city at that hour was quiet, with only a few early commuters and the occasional homeless person huddled in a doorway seeking shelter from the constant rain. She would work from 5 in the morning until 7 at night, her hands operating the same repetitive motions thousands of times a day. Her back ached constantly, her fingers developed calluses. She would eat lunch at her station, usually just a sandwich she had made the night before, because taking a full break meant losing precious minutes. After her shift at the plant, Sarah would drive straight to the diner, arriving by 7:30 to start her weekend shifts on Fridays and Saturdays. She would serve until closing at 11, then drive home, arriving close to midnight. By the time she showered and prepared for the next day, it was nearly 1 in the morning. 4 hours of sleep. Then it started all over again. Emily noticed immediately. She saw her mother's exhaustion, the dark circles under her eyes, the way Sarah would wince when she stood up from the couch. Emily tried to talk her mother out of it, saying she did not need the microscope, that she could find another way. But Sarah refused to listen. She would smile, kiss her daughter's forehead, and say the same thing every time. "You're going to change the world, baby. This is what mothers do." The months crawled by. March turned into April. Portland's famous rain seemed relentless that spring, and Sarah would often arrive home soaked from running between her car and the apartment. April became May, and the city began to bloom with cherry blossoms and the promise of summer. Sarah never stopped. She skipped her own birthday in June. She turned down invitations from co-workers to go out for drinks. She had no social life, no hobbies, no time for anything except work and a few precious hours with Emily. There were nights when Sarah would lie in bed, every muscle in her body screaming, and wonder if she was doing the right thing. But then she would remember the light in Emily's eyes when she talked about her research. She would remember every report card that came home with straight A's. She would remember the dreams her daughter had of finding cures for diseases, of making discoveries that could help people. And Sarah would get up the next morning and do it all over again. By the end of August, after 8 grueling months, Sarah had saved $5,370. She had done it. She sat in her car in the parking lot of the manufacturing plant after her shift, holding the bank statement in her trembling hands, and she cried. Not from sadness, but from pure, overwhelming relief and pride. She had given her daughter a chance. Now it was up to Emily to seize it. The morning Sarah placed the order online felt like Christmas, a birthday, and every good moment rolled into one. She sat at the computer in their small living room while Emily was at school, carefully typing in the credit card information. The microscope she had chosen was a Zeiss Primo Star, a German-engineered piece of equipment used in professional laboratories and medical schools around the world. It featured precision optics, LED illumination, and objectives that could magnify specimens up to 1,000 times with crystal clarity. The website confirmed the order. Delivery would take 7 business days. Sarah printed the confirmation page and placed it in an envelope, planning to give it to Emily that evening. She could barely contain her excitement throughout the rest of the day. At work, her co-workers noticed she was smiling more than usual, humming songs while she worked her station. Dale, her supervisor, pulled her aside during a break. "You finally got it, didn't you?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Sarah nodded, tears welling up in her eyes again. "I did it, Dale. I actually did it." He patted her shoulder, his own eyes getting a bit misty. He had watched her work herself to exhaustion for months, and he respected her more than almost anyone he had ever known. That evening, when Emily came home from school, Sarah was waiting in the kitchen with the printed confirmation page placed in a card. Emily dropped her backpack by the door, immediately sensing something was different. Her mother never got home from work before her. "Mom, what's going on? Are you okay?" Sarah handed her the card without saying a word. Emily opened it slowly, her eyes scanning the page. When she realized what she was reading, her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, realization, and then pure joy. She looked up at her mother, her hands shaking. "Mom, no. No, you didn't. You couldn't have." "I did, baby. It's coming next week." Emily dropped the paper and threw her arms around her mother, sobbing into her shoulder. They stood there in the kitchen for what felt like an eternity, both of them crying, both of them holding on to each other like they were the only two people in the world. Because in that moment, they were. Nothing else mattered. The week waiting for the delivery was the longest of both their lives. Emily could barely focus at school. She would come home every day asking if it had arrived yet. Sarah took a personal day from work for the scheduled delivery date, wanting to be there when it came. She had already cleared a space in the basement, setting up a small workstation with a sturdy table, proper lighting, and organizational supplies for Emily's research materials. The delivery truck arrived at 2:30 in the afternoon on a Thursday. The driver carried a large, carefully packaged box to the door. Sarah signed for it, her hands trembling as she took the package. It was heavier than she expected. She called Emily's cell phone immediately. "It's here. I'm leaving school right now. I don't care if I get detention." "Emily, don't you dare. You have one more class. You can wait 90 more minutes." But Emily could not wait. She got permission from her last period teacher to leave early, claiming a family emergency, which was not entirely untrue. This was an emergency of joy. She practically ran the mile from school to their apartment, arriving breathless and flushed. Together, they carefully carried the box down to the basement. Sarah had never seen her daughter so careful and reverent with anything. Emily used a box cutter to slowly open the packaging, peeling back layers of protective foam and bubble wrap. And then, there it was, the Zeiss Primo star, gleaming white and silver, looking like something from a science fiction movie. It was beautiful. Emily lifted it from the box with the kind of care someone might use handling a newborn. She placed it gently on the workstation table, then immediately began reading the instruction manual, her eyes darting across the pages with intense focus. Sarah watched her daughter with a feeling of completeness she had not experienced in years. This was what it was all for. Every sore muscle, every missed hour of sleep, every sacrifice, it was all worth it for this moment. Over the next week, Emily spent every free moment in that basement laboratory. She would come home from school, grab a quick snack, and disappear downstairs for hours. Sarah would call her up for dinner, and Emily would eat quickly before rushing back down. She was meticulous in her setup, organizing slides, preparing samples, calibrating the microscope settings. She started her research on environmental pollutants, collecting water samples from different locations around Portland, the Willamette River, various storm drains, even rainwater collected from their apartment's roof. Under the microscope's powerful lenses, Emily discovered a microscopic world that was both beautiful and disturbing. She could see individual cells from water samples, watching them react to different pollutants she introduced in controlled amounts. She documented everything with photographs taken through the microscope's camera attachment, filling notebooks with observations and data. Mr. Chen, her biology teacher, visited the house one evening to see the setup, and even he was impressed by the professional quality of Emily's work. Sarah would sometimes stand at the top of the basement stairs, listening to Emily talking to herself as she worked, narrating her observations like a real scientist. She would hear phrases like cellular membrane degradation and mitochondrial response, and feel a swell of pride so strong it almost hurt. Her daughter was not just smart, she was genuinely gifted, and now she had the tools to prove it. The apartment felt different during that week. There was a lightness, a sense of hope and possibility that had been missing during the hard months of saving. Sarah even allowed herself to relax a little. She cut back on her weekend shifts at the diner, deciding that she had earned a bit of rest. On Sunday afternoon, she and Emily sat together on the couch, watching a movie, something they had not done in months. Emily rested her head on her mother's shoulder, and Sarah stroked her hair, feeling like maybe, just maybe, all the struggling was finally behind them. But peace, Sarah would soon learn, is a fragile thing. And sometimes the people who shatter it are the ones you least expect. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening. Sarah was preparing dinner, a simple pasta dish, when her cell phone buzzed on the counter. The caller ID showed a name she had not seen in months. Jennifer, her cousin. Sarah stared at the phone for a moment before answering, already feeling a small knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. "Hey, Jen, what's up?" Jennifer's voice came through bright and cheerful, the kind of forced enthusiasm that immediately put Sarah on guard. "Sarah! Oh my God, it's been forever! How are you? How's Emily?" They exchanged pleasantries for a few minutes. Jennifer lived about 40 miles away in Gresham, a suburb on the eastern edge of the Portland metropolitan area. She was a year younger than Sarah, married to a man named Rick, who worked sporadically in construction. They had 3 boys, Jake, who was 12, Mason, 10, and Cody, 8. Sarah had always kept a polite distance from Jennifer and her family, mainly because Jennifer had a reputation for being irresponsible, and her children were, to put it mildly, difficult. "So listen," Jennifer said, her voice shifting to a tone that Sarah recognized as the prelude to a request. "Rick's got this job interview in Portland on Thursday, and I thought maybe we could come visit for the day. The boys have been asking about Emily, and it would be so great to catch up." Sarah's mind raced through excuses. She loved her cousin, or at least she wanted to, but past experiences had taught her to be cautious. The last time Jennifer had visited 2 years ago, her boys had broken a lamp, drawn on the walls with markers, and eaten an entire week's worth of groceries in a single afternoon. But saying no to family was complicated. It meant dealing with hurt feelings, passive-aggressive comments at future family gatherings, and the inevitable guilt. This Thursday, Jen, I have to work and Emily has school." "Oh, that's perfect. We'll just hang out at your place during the day. The boys can watch TV and I can relax. You know how exhausting they are. I could really use a quiet day." A quiet day. With 3 hyperactive boys, in Sarah's small apartment. The logic did not track, but before Sarah could formulate a polite refusal, Jennifer continued. "Come on, Sarah. We're family. When do we ever get to see each other? Please." There it was, the family card, the guilt trip. Sarah closed her eyes and made a decision she would regret for the rest of her life. "Okay, but Jen, you have to keep an eye on the boys. Emily has expensive equipment in the basement for a school project. It's off limits, completely off limits." Of course. I'll keep them upstairs. Don't worry about a thing." Thursday morning arrived with typical Portland drizzle, the kind of misty rain that soaked through everything. Sarah left for work at her usual time, giving Emily specific instructions to lock the basement door before she left for school. Emily was not thrilled about the visit either, having her own memories of her younger cousin's destructive tendencies, but she agreed to be polite. Jennifer arrived at 9 in the morning with her 3 boys in tow. Even from the outside, their arrival was loud. Sarah had given Jennifer a spare key months ago for emergencies, and now she heard the commotion as they entered the apartment. Jennifer was on her phone, barely acknowledging her surroundings, while the boys immediately began exploring the apartment like it was a new playground. Jake, the oldest at 12, had the gangly awkwardness of early adolescence and a permanent scowl that suggested he would rather be anywhere else. Mason was stocky and energetic, constantly moving, constantly touching things. Cody, the youngest, had the kind of wild energy that made experienced teachers cringe. All three were dressed in stained clothes that looked like they had not been washed in days. Jennifer made herself comfortable on the couch, immediately pulling out her phone and scrolling through social media. The boys, left to their own devices, began opening cabinets, turning on the television at full volume, and raiding the refrigerator. Jennifer barely glanced up. "Boys, keep it down a little," she said absently, her eyes never leaving her screen. The morning progressed with increasing chaos. The boys played rough games in the small living room, nearly knocking over Sarah's bookshelf. They made a mess in the kitchen, leaving open containers of food on the counter. Jennifer remained on the couch, occasionally laughing at something on her phone or texting furiously. She had positioned herself as a visitor rather than a parent, responsible for her children's behavior. Around noon, the boys got bored with the limited entertainment options upstairs. Mason noticed a door that he had not explored yet. The basement door. Emily had locked it before leaving for school, but Sarah kept the key on a hook near the door, thinking it would be safe there since she had explicitly told Jennifer the basement was off limits. "Mom, what's down there?" Mason asked, pointing at the door. Jennifer glanced up briefly. "I don't know. Probably just storage. Leave it alone." But leaving things alone was not in Mason's nature. He noticed the key hanging nearby and, with the opportunistic instincts of a curious child, grabbed it. Jake and Cody followed their brother, sensing an adventure. Jennifer, absorbed in a phone conversation with a friend, did not notice them disappear down the stairs. The basement was dimly lit, with only the natural light from a small window near the ceiling. But the boys' eyes quickly adjusted, and they spotted Emily's workstation. The microscope sat there, pristine and expensive-looking, surrounded by carefully organized slides, notebooks, and research materials. To Emily, this was a sacred space, a laboratory where dreams were built. To three unsupervised boys, it was a playground. "Whoa, what is that?" Cody asked, approaching the microscope. "It's like a science thing," Jake said, picking up one of the prepared slides. "My teacher has something like this at school." Mason, always the most physically oriented of the three, picked up the microscope itself, feeling its weight. "It's heavy. I wonder if it's strong." What happened next would take less than 10 minutes, but would create consequences that lasted years. The boys, with the careless curiosity of children who had never been taught to respect other people's property, began playing with the equipment. They twisted the focus knobs too hard. They looked through the eyepiece and bumped the stage. Mason, in a moment of destructive inspiration that would haunt Sarah's nightmares, suggested they test how strong the lenses were. They went back upstairs, passing Jennifer on the couch without her noticing, and went outside to the small backyard. They collected rocks, small, jagged pieces of landscaping stone. Then they returned to the basement, giggling with the excitement of their secret experiment. One by one, they took turns dropping rocks onto the microscope's lenses. The first impact created a small crack. The second shattered one of the objective lenses completely. They laughed at the sound, at the glittering pieces of glass. They thought it was fun, a game, entertainment to pass the time. They had no concept of value, no understanding of sacrifice, no awareness that they were destroying months of someone's life. By the time they were done, 3 of the 4 objective lenses were destroyed, the stage was bent, and the fine focus mechanism was jammed with debris. The microscope that had cost $5,200 and 8 months of brutal work was now an expensive pile of damaged equipment. The boys, satisfied with their destruction, went back upstairs, dropping the rocks in the backyard as if nothing had happened. Jennifer, still on her phone, did not ask where they had been. Sarah finished her shift at the manufacturing plant at 7 that evening, her body aching as usual. She drove home through rush-hour traffic, looking forward to a quiet evening. She had texted Jennifer earlier, asking how everything was going, receiving a simple, "all good" in response. She had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. Emily got home first, arriving at 6:30 after staying late at school for a study group. She dropped her backpack by the door and immediately headed for the basement, eager to continue her research. She had made significant progress over the past week and was excited to work on a new set of samples. She opened the basement door and descended the stairs. The lights were off, which was odd. She always left the desk lamp on. She flipped the switch, and the fluorescent bulb flickered to life, and then she saw it. The scream that came from Emily's throat was primal, a sound of pure anguish. Sarah, just pulling into the parking lot, heard it even from outside. She ran from her car, not bothering to close the door, and burst into the apartment. Jennifer looked up from the couch, finally showing some awareness that something might be wrong. Sarah ran to the basement door and nearly fell down the stairs in her hurry. She found Emily on her knees in front of the workstation, her hands hovering over the destroyed microscope, but not touching it, as if she could not bear to make contact with the reality of what had happened. Shattered glass covered the table. The precision lenses that had been crafted in Germany were now broken, irreparable fragments. 8 months of Sarah's life destroyed. "What happened?" Sarah asked, though she already knew. Somewhere deep in her gut, she already knew. Emily could not speak through her sobs. She just pointed at the rocks, still visible near the workstation, small pieces of damning evidence. Sarah picked one up, feeling its weight in her hand, and something inside her broke. Not just broke, shattered, like the lenses, like the dream, like the months of sacrifice that now meant nothing. Sarah climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. She emerged from the basement to find Jennifer still on the couch, now looking vaguely concerned, but not nearly concerned enough. The 3 boys were watching television, eating chips, completely unaware of the devastation they had caused. "Jennifer." Sarah's voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. "Did your boys go in the basement?" Jennifer shrugged, finally putting down her phone. "I don't know, maybe. I told them not to, if they did." "Come with me." Sarah did not wait for a response. She walked back to the basement, and Jennifer followed, sighing as if this was all a massive inconvenience. When Jennifer saw the destroyed microscope, she barely reacted. Oh, oops, oops. 8 months of 14-hour days, 8 months of skipping meals and birthdays, 8 months of calloused hands and sleepless nights, and all Jennifer could say was oops. The silence in the basement lasted only a moment before Sarah found her voice. It came out low and measured, the kind of tone that was more frightening than yelling. "Your children destroyed $5,200 worth of equipment I worked 8 months to afford, equipment that was off limits, that I specifically told you was off limits." Jennifer's expression shifted from vague concern to defensiveness in an instant. "Sarah, come on. Accidents happen. They're just kids. They didn't know any better." "Didn't know any better?" Sarah's voice rose now, the control slipping. "They're not toddlers, Jennifer. Jake is 12 years old. They knew exactly what they were doing wrong. That's why they snuck down here." Emily was still on her knees, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The sound of her daughter's heartbreak did something to Sarah, unlocking a rage she did not know she possessed. She had always been calm, composed, the responsible one in the family, but there are limits to what any person can endure. "You need to pay for this," Sarah said, her voice steady again but filled with steel. $5,200. Your children destroyed it. You're responsible." Jennifer's eyes widened and she actually laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "Are you serious right now? Sarah, I don't have that kind of money. Nobody just has $5,000 lying around. I had that money. I earned that money, working 14-hour shifts for 8 months, barely sleeping, barely eating. While you were comfortable at home, I was destroying my body so my daughter could have a future. And your children, who you were supposed to be watching, destroyed it in minutes. And I didn't tell them to go down here, Jennifer shot back, her voice rising to match Sarah's. You should have locked the door better. You should have hidden the key. This is partially your fault for not being more careful. The words hung in the air like poison. Sarah actually took a step back, stunned by the audacity. You're blaming me? You brought your children into my home. I told you explicitly that the basement was off limits. You were supposed to be supervising them. You were sitting on my couch, on your phone, while they destroyed my daughter's future. They're kids, Sarah. Kids break things. That's what they do. You're acting like they committed a crime. They did commit a crime. It's called destruction of property, and you're enabling them by refusing to take responsibility. Jennifer crossed her arms, her face flushing red with anger and embarrassment. Fine, you want to be like that? I'm sorry your microscope got broken, but I'm not paying for it. I don't have the money, and even if I did, I wouldn't give you $5,000 for something my kids accidentally broke. Accidents happen. Sarah moved closer to Jennifer, her voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more menacing than shouting. Get your children, get out of my house, and don't ever come back. Oh, so now you're going to cut off family over this? Over a stupid microscope? It's not about the microscope, Sarah finally shouted, the words exploding out of her. It's about respect. It's about accountability. It's about you sitting there defending your children's destructive behavior instead of teaching them that actions have consequences. It's about you telling me this is my fault. Get out! Jennifer stormed up the stairs, grabbing her purse from the couch. You're unbelievable. You're really going to choose a thing over family. Come on, boys, we're leaving. The three boys, who had been watching television throughout the entire confrontation, slowly stood up. They had heard the yelling, but did not understand the weight of what had happened. To them, it was just another time Mum was fighting with someone. They had seen it before. They would see it again. As Jennifer herded her children toward the door, she turned back one more time. You're going to regret this, Sarah. When the whole family hears how you threw us out over an accident, you're going to be the bad guy, not me. The door slammed shut. The apartment fell silent except for Emily's continued crying from the basement. Sarah stood in the middle of her living room, shaking with adrenaline and fury and a deep, soul-crushing exhaustion. She had worked so hard. She had sacrificed so much. And in one afternoon, it was all gone. She went back down to the basement and sat beside Emily, pulling her daughter into her arms. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other while the destroyed microscope sat on the table like a monument to broken dreams. Eventually, Emily pulled back, wiping her eyes. Mom, my project, the scholarship. I can't finish without the microscope. All my research, all the data I collected, it's useless now. The competition deadline is in 3 months. I can't afford to start over even if we had the equipment. Sarah stroked her daughter's hair, trying to find words of comfort but coming up empty. What could she say? That it would be okay? It would not be okay. That they would figure it out. How? They had no money left. The savings were gone. She was already exhausted from months of overwork. She could not do it again. Not that fast. I'm so sorry, baby, Sarah whispered. I'm so sorry. On that night, after Emily had cried herself to sleep, Sarah sat alone at the kitchen table with her laptop. She looked up legal options. Small claims court. The limit in Oregon was $10,000, and the process was relatively simple. She did not need a lawyer for amounts under that threshold. She could file the paperwork herself, serve Jennifer with the summons, and let a judge decide. But pursuing legal action against family was not a simple decision. Sarah knew what would happen. The family would take sides. Her Aunt Martha, Jennifer's mother, would be furious. Cousins would get involved. Family gatherings would become battlegrounds. There would be whispers and accusations. Sarah would be painted as the villain, the money-hungry cousin who sued family over an accident. But was it really an accident? Sarah kept coming back to that question. An accident implies unforeseeable circumstances, a mistake despite reasonable precautions. What happened in her basement was not an accident. It was negligence. It was a lack of supervision. It was children who had never been taught boundaries or consequences, acting without awareness or care. And it was a mother who refused to take responsibility. Sarah spent hours researching, reading articles about family conflicts and legal recourse. She found forums where people shared similar stories, some who had sued family members and regretted it, others who had let things go and regretted that instead. There was no easy answer, but as she sat there, thinking about Emily's tear-stained face, thinking about the 8 months of suffering, thinking about Jennifer's complete lack of remorse, Sarah made her decision. She would file the lawsuit. Not for revenge, not to punish, but because some lines cannot be crossed without consequences. Because Emily needed to see that her mother would fight for her, would stand up for what was right, even when it was hard. Because somewhere, somehow, there had to be accountability. The next morning, Sarah took another personal day from work and went to the Multnomah County Courthouse in downtown Portland. The building was imposing, with tall columns and marble floors that echoed with footsteps. She filled out the small claims forms, listing Jennifer as the defendant, describing the incident, and attaching photos of the destroyed microscope that she had taken the night before. The filing fee was $110, money she could barely afford, but she paid it with the last remaining balance on her credit card. Within a week, Jennifer was served with the court summons. Sarah's phone exploded with calls and texts, first from Jennifer, furious and incredulous, then from Aunt Martha, crying and begging Sarah to drop the case, then from various cousins, some supportive, most critical. The family group chat that Sarah had been part of for years suddenly went silent for her, replaced by a new chat that she was not included in. She knew they were talking about her, judging her, condemning her. One text from Aunt Martha particularly stung. "How can you do this? They're just children. You're destroying this family over money. Your mother would be ashamed of you." Sarah's mother had passed away 5 years earlier from cancer. The reference to her was a low blow designed to maximize guilt. Sarah almost responded, almost tried to explain, but she stopped herself. There was no point. People who had already made up their minds would not be swayed by explanations. Emily, meanwhile, had fallen into a deep depression. She stopped going to her basement workspace. She struggled to focus at school. Mr. Chen reached out to Sarah, concerned about the sudden change in his star student. Sarah explained what had happened, and Mr. Chen was appalled. He offered to let Emily use the school's microscope after hours, but it was not the same. The school equipment was older, less powerful, and shared by dozens of students. Emily's research was too specialized, too advanced. Without her own equipment, the project was dead. The court date was set for 6 weeks later. Sarah spent that time in a fog, going through the motions of work and daily life, but feeling hollow inside. She had made her choice, and there was no going back. But the isolation was harder than she had anticipated. Half her family had turned their backs on her. She felt judged everywhere she went, even though most people did not actually know what had happened. 3 weeks before the court date, Sarah received a message from an unexpected source, her Uncle Tom, Aunt Martha's husband, and Jennifer's father. He asked to meet for coffee. Sarah agreed, curious and a bit apprehensive. They met at a small cafe near Sarah's apartment on a rainy Saturday morning. Uncle Tom was in his 60s, a retired electrician with weathered hands and kind eyes. He ordered coffee for both of them and sat down across from Sarah, studying her face. "You look tired," he said simply. "I am tired, Uncle Tom. I'm exhausted." He nodded slowly. "Martha is furious with you. Most of the family is. But I wanted to hear your side before I made any judgments." Sarah told him everything. The 8 months of work, the sacrifice, Emily's dreams, the explicit warning to Jennifer, the destruction, and most importantly, Jennifer's complete refusal to take responsibility. Uncle Tom listened without interrupting, his expression growing sadder with each detail. When she finished, he sat in silence for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. Finally, he looked up. "Jennifer has always been like this. Even as a child, she never wanted to face consequences. Martha and we failed her in that way. We made excuses, we cleaned up her messes, and we taught her that she could avoid responsibility if she complained loud enough. Now she's passing that on to her boys, and I hate to see it. But it's hard for a parent to admit they raised someone who turned out this way." "I don't want to destroy the family," Sarah said quietly. "But I can't just let this go. It's not right." Uncle Tom reached across the table and patted her hand. "You're not destroying anything, Sarah. You're the only one acting like an adult. Jennifer destroyed something precious, and she needs to face that. I'll talk to Martha. I can't promise she'll listen, but I'll try. And for what it's worth, you have my support." Those words meant more to Sarah than almost anything else during that dark period. She was not completely alone. At least one person understood. The Multnomah County Small Claims Courtroom was smaller than Sarah had imagined from television shows. It was a simple room with wooden benches, a judge's desk at the front, and fluorescent lighting that made everything look slightly washed out. Sarah arrived 30 minutes early with Emily beside her. They sat in the back row, watching other cases get called and resolved. Some were settled quickly with handshakes and agreements. Others were contentious, with raised voices and angry gestures. Jennifer arrived 10 minutes before their scheduled time, accompanied by Aunt Martha, and surprisingly, a man Sarah did not recognize wearing a cheap suit. Sarah's heart sank. Jennifer had brought someone, possibly thinking he was a lawyer, though in small claims court in Oregon, lawyers were not allowed to represent parties. The man turned out to be Rick, Jennifer's husband, who had apparently taken the day off work. He was trying to look official, but his ill-fitting suit and nervous demeanor gave away his lack of legal knowledge. When their case was called, Sarah and Jennifer approached the front. The judge, a woman in her 50s named Judge Patricia Reeves, looked between them with an expression that suggested she had seen this type of family dispute many times before. She asked Sarah to present her case first. Sarah spoke clearly and calmly, despite her racing heart. She explained the 8 months of work, showed the court her pay stubs and bank statements demonstrating the savings pattern. She presented the receipt for the microscope purchase and photographs of the equipment both pristine and destroyed. She showed the court the rocks that had been used to smash the lenses. She explained that she had explicitly warned Jennifer that the basement was off-limits, and that Jennifer had been present in the home, responsible for supervising her children. Emily testified next, describing the importance of the microscope for her research project and scholarship opportunity. She showed the judge her research notes, her acceptance into the Young Researchers Program, and a letter from Mr. Chen explaining the professional quality of her work and the impossibility of completing it without proper equipment. Emily's voice cracked several times as she spoke, but she maintained her composure. Then it was Jennifer's turn. She stood at the podium, and Sarah could see her hands shaking. Jennifer's strategy became immediately clear: deflection and minimization. "Your Honor, I love my cousin. This whole situation has been blown completely out of proportion. My children did not intentionally destroy anything. They were being curious kids. Sarah left a key hanging where they could reach it. She didn't properly secure expensive equipment. My boys thought it was a toy. They had no idea it cost that much money." Judge Reeves interrupted. Henderson, you were present in the home when this occurred, correct? Yes, but I can't watch them every single second. Kids need freedom to explore. Were you aware that the basement was off limits? Jennifer hesitated. Sarah mentioned something about it, yes. She mentioned something, or she explicitly told you the basement was forbidden. She told me not to let them go down there. And yet they did. Where were you when your children went to the basement? I was in the living room. I was on a phone call. I didn't realize they had left the room. Judge Reeves made a note. Continue. Jennifer seemed to realize her strategy was not working. Look, I'm a single-income family. My husband works construction when he can find it. We barely make rent most months. I don't have $5,000. Even if I wanted to pay, I can't. Sending me a judgment isn't going to change that. You can't get blood from a stone. The judge turned to Rick. Mr. Henderson, do you have anything to add? Rick stood awkwardly. Yeah, I mean, we really don't have that kind of money. And honestly, I think family should work this stuff out without courts. This is just going to make everyone hate each other. Family working things out requires both parties willing to find a solution, Judge Reeves said. Mrs. Henderson, did you offer any form of compensation to Ms. Mitchell after the incident? No, because it was an accident. Did you apologize? Jennifer's silence was answer enough. The judge looked back at her notes, then at the photographs of the destroyed microscope, then at Emily's tear-stained but determined face. Here's what I see, Judge Reeves began. I see a single mother who worked herself to exhaustion to provide an opportunity for her daughter. I see expensive equipment destroyed by children who were inadequately supervised. I see a defendant who, rather than taking responsibility, has blamed the plaintiff for not preventing her children's destructive behavior. I see a complete absence of accountability. She paused, letting her words settle over the courtroom. The law is clear on parental responsibility. Parents are liable for the destructive actions of their minor children, particularly when those actions result from negligence in supervision. Mrs. Henderson, you were present in the home. You were responsible for your children. You were explicitly warned about the basement. Your failure to supervise constitutes negligence. The plaintiff has provided clear evidence of the value of the destroyed property and the circumstances of its destruction. Jennifer's face had gone pale. Aunt Martha, sitting in the gallery, looked like she might faint. I find in favor of the plaintiff, Sarah Mitchell, in the full amount of $5,200. Mrs. Henderson, you have 90 days to make payment arrangements with the court. You may pay in installments, but the minimum payment is $433 per month for 12 months. Failure to make payments will result in wage garnishment and additional penalties. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down with a crack that seemed to split the room in two. Jennifer stood frozen at the podium, her mouth open in disbelief. Aunt Martha burst into tears. Rick put his arm around Jennifer, whispering something Sarah could not hear. Sarah and Emily stood together, holding hands, neither feeling particularly victorious. Justice had been served, but it tasted bitter. As they left the courtroom, Aunt Martha intercepted them in the hallway. Her face was red and wet with tears, her finger pointing accusingly at Sarah. I hope you're proud of yourself. You've destroyed this family, over money, over a thing. Your mother would be disgusted. Sarah stopped walking. For weeks, she had absorbed these accusations without defending herself, but something about standing in that courthouse, having just been vindicated by a judge, gave her strength. My mother, Sarah said quietly but firmly, taught me to work hard, to sacrifice for the people I love, and to stand up for what's right even when it's difficult. She taught me that family means supporting each other, not enabling bad behavior. She taught me that love without accountability isn't love at all. It's just enabling. And if you think she would want me to let my daughter's dreams be destroyed without consequences, then you didn't know her at all. Aunt Martha opened her mouth to respond, but found no words. Sarah and Emily walked past her, down the courthouse steps and into the grey Portland afternoon. They got into Sarah's car and sat in silence for several minutes before Emily spoke. "Mom, was it worth it? The lawsuit, I mean, losing half the family?" Sarah thought about the question carefully before answering. "Baby, we didn't lose anything real. Real family shows up when you need them. Real family takes responsibility. Real family doesn't make excuses for bad behavior. The people we lost were never really there to begin with. We just couldn't see it until now." The following weeks brought the reality of the judgment. Jennifer made her first payment, though Sarah knew from Uncle Tom that it was only because the court had threatened wage garnishment from Rick's paycheck. The family remained divided. Some cousins quietly reached out to Sarah, expressing support they had been afraid to voice publicly. Others maintained their distance, apparently convinced that Sarah was the villain in this story. But something unexpected happened. The story of what Sarah had done spread beyond the family, picked up by a local Portland news blog that focused on human interest stories. Someone, Sarah never found out who, had sent them the details. The blog post, titled "Single Mother Fights Back After Family Destroys Daughter's Scholarship Dreams," went viral in the Portland area. The response was overwhelming. Complete strangers sent messages of support. Several local businesses reached out, offering donations. A medical equipment company in Beaverton, after reading the story, offered to provide a replacement microscope at cost, cutting the price nearly in half. A local crowdfunding campaign, started by someone Sarah had never met, raised $3,000 in less than a week. People were moved by Sarah's sacrifice and outraged by Jennifer's behavior. Within 2 months, Emily had a new microscope, even better than the original. She dove back into her research with renewed determination, working longer hours than before. The deadline for the Young Researchers Program had been extended by 2 weeks due to a technicality, giving her just enough time to complete her project. 6 months after the court case, the scholarship results were announced. Emily won. Not just a scholarship, but the first-place prize in her category, including a full ride to Oregon Health and Science University, a $5,000 research grant, and a paid summer internship at a real research laboratory. When the acceptance letter arrived, Sarah and Emily held each other and cried, just as they had the day the first microscope arrived. The scholarship award ceremony was held at the university's auditorium. Sarah sat in the audience, wearing a dress she had bought specifically for the occasion, watching her daughter walk across the stage to accept her award. Emily's research on environmental pollutants and cellular degradation was praised as innovative and important. When Emily gave her acceptance speech, she talked about her mother, about sacrifice, about the belief that education was worth fighting for. "My mother worked 14-hour days for 8 months to give me this opportunity," Emily said, her voice carrying across the auditorium. "She taught me that when you love something, you protect it. When something is worth having, it's worth fighting for. And when someone wrongs you, you stand up for yourself, even when it's hard, even when people judge you, even when you stand alone. Mom, this is as much yours as it is mine." The audience erupted in applause. Sarah sat in her seat, tears streaming down her face, feeling a complicated mix of pride, exhaustion, and vindication. Everything she had been through, all the judgment, all the family drama, all the sacrifice, it had led to this moment. Her daughter was going to college. Her daughter was going to become a researcher. Her daughter was going to change the world. After the ceremony, as they walked to the parking lot, Emily linked her arm through her mother's. "You know what the crazy part is," Emily said. "If Jennifer's kids hadn't destroyed the first microscope, the story never would have gone viral. I never would have gotten all that support. The equipment company never would have helped us. In a weird way, Jennifer gave me an even better opportunity than we had before." Sarah smiled. "Well, let's not give her too much credit. But I see your point. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. They drove home through the Portland streets, past the manufacturing plant where Sarah still worked, but had finally been promoted to a supervisory position with better hours. Past the diner where she no longer needed to work weekends. Past the neighborhood where they had struggled and sacrificed and survived. The relationship with Jennifer never recovered. They remained estranged, connected only by the monthly payment reminders from the court system. Aunt Martha eventually reached out to Sarah a year after the lawsuit with a tentative apology. She did not fully understand Sarah's position, but she missed her niece and wanted some form of relationship. Sarah accepted the olive branch, though their connection would never be what it once was. But here was what Sarah learned. Not all relationships are worth saving. Some people come into your life to teach you lessons, and sometimes that lesson is about boundaries, about knowing when to walk away, about understanding that family is not just about blood, but about respect, accountability, and genuine care. Sarah learned that standing up for yourself is not selfish, that demanding consequences is not cruel, that protecting what you have worked for is not greedy. These were hard lessons, learned in the worst way possible, but they were lessons that made her stronger. As for Emily, she went on to become exactly what she had always dreamed of. A researcher, a scientist, someone who contributed to the world in meaningful ways. She published papers, she made discoveries. And years later, when she won a prestigious award for her work in cellular biology, she mentioned her mother in the acceptance speech. I stand here today because my mother taught me that dreams are worth protecting, that sacrifice is noble, that hard work pays off, and that sometimes the people who love you most are the ones who fight the hardest, even when everyone else tells them to give up. Sarah watched that speech on a live stream, sitting in her small apartment in Portland, now just her living there since Emily had moved away for graduate school. She watched her daughter, successful and confident and brilliant, and she thought about that day in the courtroom, about Judge Reeves's gavel coming down, about the choice she had made to stand her ground. And Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she would make the same choice again, every single time. This story raises questions that many of us face. Where do we draw the line between family loyalty and self-respect? Should Sarah have just let it go to keep the peace, or was she right to demand accountability, even if it meant losing relationships? We want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been in a situation where family crossed a boundary? How did you handle it? Your story might help someone facing the same dilemma right now. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next video. We share real stories about real people facing impossible choices, just like you. And before you go, check out the video we're recommending next. It's about a mother who discovered her sister was stealing her identity for years. You won't believe how that one ends. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for being part of this community where we can share, learn, and grow together.